With Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain due out very soon, I wanted to take a month to celebrate the Metal Gear series. Today's video will be the first of 3 Metal Gear Month videos, as well as some special articles on Gaming Rebellion outlining the man himself, Big Boss. My first experience with the Metal Gear series was with Metal Gear on the NES. Unfortunately, my Metal Gear NES cart is currently not working, so the footage here is from the MSX version. Metal Gear was a tough and not fun experience for me as a kid. I wasn't really into the military thing back then, so after dying a few times at the beginning, I lost interest. Coming back to it as an adult, it's still not a perfect game by any means, but I appreciate it for what it is, and it's fun to play. I skipped out on Snake's Revenge for the NES. And while that's effectively North America's Metal Gear 2, at least back in the 90s, I just didn't really want to play it because I wasn't really interested in Metal Gear. But I guess I just didn't even really know it existed. Whatever. Well, a lot of people crap on it because Mr. Kojima wasn't involved in the game directly. But, you know, I think I might talk about that later. Around Christmas of 1998, I had my first encounter with Metal Gear Solid. Because I wasn't really into military-type games, the release of MGS passed me by without my noticing. I visited with my uncle while he was in town at my grandparents' house, and he was playing this game. He had just started, in fact. I ended up watching him play through the majority of it, and I absolutely loved the great story. While I had heard voice acting in a video game before, nothing compared to this. This was a movie. This game was inspired by all the action movies of the 80s that you loved. I remember that one of my very good friends tried to convince me not to buy Metal Gear Solid, because due to all the cutscenes and cinematic elements, it wasn't really that long of a game. Games today are still being sold on how much content they offer and how long you can put into it, but back then, they weren't bloated with ho-hum content yet. This was still when side quests weren't the majority of the game. RPGs could take you 40 to 60 solid hours of gameplay to complete, and it wasn't all fetch quests and exploring. That's a completely different discussion, however. I didn't care that the game had a ton of story artificially inflating the game time because that was the main reason I wanted it. When Metal Gear Solid 2 was released, things started getting crazy in the video game world, and people argue that games were starting to get too close to movies. Interactive movies, they'd call them. While they certainly have a valid argument, things hadn't quite gotten to that point yet with the first Metal Gear Solid game. Sure, there are pretty lengthy cutscenes, but you don't have an insufferable amount of codec conversations to slog through. I feel like some ignorant flack from Metal Gear Solid 2's long drawn-out and convoluted story has penetrated the entire series, and the worst hit is the original game. Metal Gear Solid does have its fair share of convoluted dialogue sequences, but for the most part, you never have a problem catching on to what is happening within the story. Metal Gear Solid's cutscenes are memorable and entertaining, and the codec calls aren't at all intolerable or hard to sit through. Quite the contrary, actually. I could listen to David Hayter voice Solid Snake all day long. He makes the character interesting, and this is arguably his best performance of the character. Sorry, Quentin Flynn.
The leader of this takeover incident is claiming that he's Snake himself.
The legendary mercenary?
I need as much data on him as possible. Everything they have on him after the Shadow Moses incident.
Who are you?
I'm not one of them. The DARPA chief told me he gave them his detonation code. What about yours?
Oh, I get it. Jim sent you. You're from the Pentagon.
Answer my question. What about your code? There's no time.
I talked.
What? Now the terrorists have both codes and can launch any time.
It's not like I didn't fight.
I don't want to say that I dislike Metal Gear Solid 2. I just don't hold it in as high of regard as Metal Gear Solid. This game is damn near perfect for its time. It has awesome story, just one of the best stories in video games, and it has some solid gameplay too. You knew that was coming. Metal Gear Solid mostly plays from a top-down perspective. What's really cool about this is the fact that while most of the major gameplay throws back to the 2D Metal Gear games from the MSX, specifically Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, it also incorporates a ton of cinematic camera work when Snake finds himself in different positions or areas. While a lot of game series from this era had significant growing pains jumping to the third dimension, Metal Gear Solid makes a leap almost seamlessly. Sure, there are a few parts where camera work is a bit wonky, but they are few and far between. Moving around in the 3D space works pretty well. The game was released well after Sony released the DualShock controller, so you weren't limited to the control pad. The analog stick was worth picking up just for this game, because it made the controls so much more silky smooth. The great thing about the shooting mechanic is that with single-shot weapons, Snake doesn't actually fire until you let go of the trigger button. This allows you to hold down the trigger button to aim, paint the enemy with your laser pointer, and then fire with extreme precision. The whole point of the game is to avoid direct conflict with the enemy, only fighting when absolutely necessary. Taking on a large contingent of Genome soldiers at once is a death wish. Snake isn't equipped to handle a Contra-esque approach to combat. Even though you don't direct Snake to take enemies head-on, the game still makes you feel like a powerful badass. I get chills thinking of how intense that first fight with Sniper Wolf was. Running up the stairs of the communication tower, trying to get away from pursuing Genome soldiers, was an adrenaline rush. Fighting a freaking combat chopper was exhilarating, and that line right before,
I've got to go and swat a noisy fly.
Holy shit, this was an incredible experience.
See you in hell. Liquid. Liquid!
Snake! Did you like my sunglasses? You point a weapon at your own brother?
Why did you disguise yourself as bastard?
So I could manipulate you more easily. And you performed quite well, I must say. Although the boys at the Pentagon are probably saying the same thing.
The hell are you talking about?
The graphics were simply stunning at the time the game was released. I don't even remember questioning the fact that the character models had no eyes. This was the most realistic looking game to date. The animation of the characters was great, and the game actually had cinematography. Seriously. Cutscenes and gameplay looked amazing, and it was an incredible touch that many gamers hadn't seen before. The music helped set the mood, giving you a sense of danger, foreboding, or urgency, depending on your situation. While it was mostly atmospheric, it still sticks with me today. You know what? Everybody's right. Metal Gear Solid isn't just a game. It's an interactive, cinematic, freaking awesome movie, game, video game hybrid experience. It's one of the best damn games I've ever played. It's one of my favorite games of all time, and that will absolutely never change. If you want to play Metal Gear Solid, the disc itself isn't that expensive. Also, you can download it on the PlayStation Network for a very good price. There's also a PC copy somewhere out there, though I don't know the price on it. And I don't even know if you can get it on Steam or Good Old Games or what, because I am terrible to you guys, and I never do my research. That's a lie. But yeah, Metal Gear Solid, one of my favorite games of all time. You absolutely must play it if you're a fan of video games and you want to know any kind of history about video games and you want to know the history of how video games got to be so cinematic. Play Metal Gear Solid. That's all I have. I appreciate you guys watching, and later.